afternoon. Welcome to our continuing review on the glories of Hellenism. Today we're going to touch a little bit on Crete. The beginning is with a quotation from Homer. There is a land called Crete, in the midst of the wine-dark sea, a fair, rich land, begirt with water, and therein are many men past counting, and 90 cities. When Homer sang these lines, perhaps in the 9th century before our era, Greece had almost forgotten, though the poet had not, that the island whose wealth seemed to him even then so great had once been wealthier still, that it held sway with a powerful fleet over most of the Aegean and part of mainland Greece, and that it had developed 1,000 years before the siege of Troy, one of the most artistic civilizations in history. Perhaps it was this Aegean culture, as ancient to him as he is to us, that Homer recalled when he spoke of a golden age in which men had been more civilized and life more refined than in his own disordered time. The Minoan civilization still fascinates us and sometimes puzzles us. It's really considered by many the beginning of Greek history. In fact, people even today, when they talk about Crete, they say, are the Cretans Greek? Of course they're Greek. They were always Greek, and they have produced some great leaders in modern Greek history as well as way back in those days. But today the subject is the Minoan civilization. And it was one of those periods that reached the acme of human endeavor. The arts flourished there. If you go to Knossos, for example, and you visit the ancient palace, and you see the wall paintings, you see the boxers, you see the fishermen carrying their prize. The paintings there that are on the walls look like they were just painted yesterday. It's absolutely amazing, and they go back, of course, thousands of years. It's a rich culture. It had a very rich tradition of commerce throughout the Mediterranean, especially with close ties to Egypt, as well as other ports of the Mediterranean. And it flourished as a great commercial sea power, as well as a naval power when necessary. As I mentioned, the Minoans enjoyed a very high degree of civilization, which we still admire and marvel at today. We can mention a couple of things. Their drainage system, very sophisticated, bringing water up from the mountains, down through the palace, through terracotta pipes, and then the wastewater was carried away from the palace the same way, through terracotta pipes, in a system that wasn't equaled anywhere in the world at that time. In fact, it didn't get anywhere close to that until many centuries later. That's just one example of their advanced civilization and their knowledge of how to create systems that would be helpful to their society, at least to the palace. Now, I don't know if they had that throughout the rest of the country, but we're focusing on the palace at Knossos. They also were supremely confident. They must have been tremendous warriors, because they had no fortifications. Now, so many other cultures, especially if they're isolated and they're on an island, and they're subject to jeopardy from other nations that have fleets, warships and all that could come in and attack them, they did not have fortifications. That's an amazing thing when you stop and reflect on that. They had extensive contact with other countries, as I mentioned earlier, primarily Egypt, but their trade and commerce went all over the Mediterranean world, and they had great knowledge of other countries, and they must have maintained very, very good relations with them based on commerce and to some extent on the arts. They traded their arts and crafts, their pottery and other things with other cultures in the Mediterranean area. So all in all, the Minoan period is a remarkable one for its achievements in many fields, and that's why I'd recommend that you go to Crete as well as other parts of Greece, and when you go to Crete, your trip would not be complete without a visit to the great palace at Knossos. And you will see what we've been talking about and a lot more. World of Greece, ancient Greek history is so rich. There's so many places to cover. We just don't have time to do justice to it. But we are going to touch briefly on Mycenae, which is down in the Peloponnesus in the Argolid Peninsula, and which, like the others we have mentioned up to now, are very rich in its history. Mycenae reached its peak from 1500 BC to 1000 BC. It became very wealthy from trade with other places all over the Mediterranean, and it's famous for its artworks in metals especially. That was their key source of trade. They traded various works of metals. For example, we have here the Vaphio cup, which was found, this is a copy, mind you. I don't have the original. The original is in a museum in Greece. But this beautiful Vaphio cup made of gold was found in a little place called Vaphio near Sparta. And it's one of the representative works of art that was made by the wonderful craftsmen and artists of those days in Mycenae. The others came from the tombs, the shaft tombs as they're called, because they're dug right deep shaft tunnels into the ground, which under Schliemann, the great excavator, the archaeologist, uncovered enormous number of very, very beautiful and rich items of gold and other precious metals, which are seen today in Athens and in some other parts of the world, especially in Berlin. The unlike the Minoans, who you remember didn't have any fortifications, the Mycenaeans were very heavily fortified. They had become raiders themselves, and they raided other places, other nations up and down the Mediterranean, and they were subject to attacks themselves, so they had to move back from the seashore for protection. And after the fall of Knossos, Mycenae prospered as never before. I'd like to read to you a short passage from Will Durant's The Story of Civilization, The Life of Greece, who says that the rising wealth of the Shaftgrave dynasty raised great palaces upon the hills of Mycenae and Tiryns. Mycenaean art took on a character of its own and captured the markets of the Aegean. Now the commerce of the mainland princes reached eastward into Cyprus and Syria, and southward through the Cyclades to Egypt, westward through Italy to Spain, northward through Boeotia and Thessaly to the Danube, and found itself balked only at Troy. Like Rome, absorbing and disseminating the civilization of Hellas, so Mycenae, won by the culture of dying Crete, spread the Mycenaean phase of that culture throughout the Mediterranean world. Now, at our next meeting, we're going to be discussing the Persian Wars, and I hope to join you at that time for another look at the glory of Hellenism. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.